Deck the halls with boughs of holly. It is a good time in 2023 because we are starting Volume 8 of Heaven Official's Blessing. Oh, this volume feels so light. I can't believe we're on the final volume of Heaven Official's Blessing. What is this episode? This is week 74. You add the 12 other weeks of the OVA and the Donghua, so we're like at 86 weeks of Heaven Official's Blessing. It's been a while, right? So I'm so excited. I'm excited that if you're watching this on Patreon, it's Christmas. If you waited on YouTube, it's New Year's Day. So either way, we're rounding out the year with Heaven Official's Blessing, and we're starting the year with Heaven Official's Blessing, and that is so exciting. And I really love this cover. I'm not going to read the back, obviously, because it'd be spoilers, but I really love this color. I love the black with the lamps. I love it's Xie Lian and HuaLian in an embrace. It's not giving anything away. It's very demure. It's very classic. It's them together at the end, which is what we want, but it's giving us nothing. It's like, no, you don't get anything, right? Now, usually there's an image of Xie Lian and HuaLian that are with the little, like the ones back there that I have there, but it's not there. So I don't know what that means, but oh well. Anyway, I'm excited to start this volume. We are starting right out with 4 chapters, which is after last week when Mu Qing seemed suspicious and Function was like, grab him. I'm like, well, what? This is Mount Tonglu all over again. MXTX, you taking us in circles. What are we doing? So I'm excited for these 4 chapters. We're looking at chapters 231 to 234, which is pages 11 through 47 of the book. This is going to be split into 9 parts. 9 parts, which it's funny, some of the parts starting out are like 3 and 4 chapters, which you'd be like, well, that seems like you're gonna get through it rather quickly. But then we go to like 2 chapters, 2 chapters, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, and then 1 chapter. So it's kind of all over the place. And then at the end of it all, Reiki has been gathering together all of the edits that MXTX has done to the text after it was already being published. All of those. And then obviously we have the audio drama, we have the live action, the Donghua to all go through, which is exciting. And to talk about those. So that's going to be a fun time. But yeah, and then the theory docs that everybody's been keeping in the Discord to use for the live stream or whatever. That's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm sad that we're on volume 8 of Heaven Official's Blessing because it's weird. It feels like we just started the story, but we've also been reading it for a very long time. So it's a very weird balance there. And I'm sad we're on the last volume because I don't want the story to end, but I also have an entire half of Whiteboard Coon with questions I need answered. So I'm excited to be here where hopefully we'll be getting answers very quickly. That would be great. But before we start these chapters for today, I do have a couple of comments that I want to go through. Shreya Sharma, 1101, talked about how it's very important to realize that they were talking about, we start to feel bad for Junwoo and his backstory and all that he's gone through. But the fact of the matter is, Junwoo is a toxic abuser. And I liked that Shreya Sharma talked about how in real life, a lot of times toxic abusers will try to make their victims feel bad for them and keep them coming back and developing Stockholm Syndrome and getting caught up with them and getting to where they can't escape that relationship. And very much Bai Wuxiang and Junwoo have done that with Xie Lian, trying to keep him consistently around him, and HuaLian's like, get away from him. So I think that even though we can feel bad for Junwoo, we can feel bad for his backstory and all the things that have happened to him, he is still at present a toxic abuser and someone Xie Lian should not be around. So I know some people in the Discord have said they're Junwoo and Xie Lian shippers. I'm no judgment to you. I question, but no judgment to you. But to me, Xie Lian and HuaLian are like the OTP. There is no one else for either of them. It's like Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji and Modao Zushi. MXTX makes some amazing one true pairs, and you're just like, no, it's just them. Nobody else. But if you want to support that, no tea, no shade. It's just not for me. But Empty Cicada and Anime Annie were my other comments. Empty Cicada talked about how Junwoo tempting the heavenly officials in these last several chapters could be likened to how Xie Lian was testing the people to see if they would save him for the human face disease. And at first I was like, I respectfully disagree with that, but I think Anime Annie kind of backed up their comment with a little more clarification. So I want to talk about that with Empty Cicada's comment about that along with Anime Annie. Empty Cicada also said that both could have killed the people involved, but they were trying to prove a point. My thing is their point proven are on opposite ends of the spectrum, and Anime Annie kind of elaborates on that, saying Junwoo wants to prove that Xie Lian's friends are selfish and are going to be easy to leave them as they've left Junwoo. And Xie Lian, Xie Lian was trying to prove my dogs. Xie Lian was trying to prove. What are you guys doing? Quit it. And the thing about it is that Junwoo tempting the heavenly officials was not only trying to pray at the heavenly officials and prove how weak-minded they are and easily to fall apart that they are, but also using it to destroy the human array, which would put Xie Lian in a pit of despair like a toxic abuser would. You have that. And it's also, as Anime Annie says, to try to show that the heavenly officials, they're not Xie Lian's friends like he thinks that they are. They're not this, whatever. But my thing is, the thing about it is, Junwoo and the Prince of Wuyong is a really codependent person, it feels like. Like, they're not like Xie Lian, which is what HuaChang has been trying to say for so long. He's like, Xie Lian, you are not like him. And Anime Annie kind of talks about that too, in that Xie Lian just needs one person. He said that back in book 4. He just needs one person to believe in him. And for the most part, it's been HuaChang, so checkbox met. But he doesn't need a whole lot of people. Like, yeah, Xie Lian is friends with Mu Qing and Feng Xin, but is he really that close to Pei Ming and Yin Yu? like Junwoo tempting Yin Yu and Pei Ming, Xie Lian's like, we're not really besties. So, okay. But I feel like Junwoo is such a codependent person and depends on others and relies upon others and needing that validation. Xie Lian's never needed that validation. He doesn't care. Xie Lian's always been like, whatever, I'm gonna do what I want. And it seems like Junwoo kind of wants that validation. That's why he's like, I'm the heavenly emperor. I want the praise. I want the glory. I'm the prince. Like all this. Like he wants that showered affection and he's codependent on it. And Xie Lian never wanted to be emperor. He never wanted to be prince. He doesn't want any of that. He could care less if it's just him and HuaChang the rest of his days, and he doesn't even visit anybody else. It's like Junwoo is an extrovert and Xie Lian is an introvert, and they just happen to have similar upbringings and similar backgrounds, but they're not the same people at all. So it's fascinating to me, right? And I feel like that's why it doesn't work if Junwoo gets frustrated, because he's just wanting Xie Lian to be another version of him, and that's not the case, and it probably never will be the case. So he got close by putting Xie Lian at the bottom of the pit of despair, but he just needed one person to help him get out, right? So I like that. I like also that Qi Ying chose Mei Nianqing to like give the body of Yin Yu to, and Anime Annie pointed out that that was probably because Qi Ying saw how close Mei Nianqing and Xie Lian were, and so he was like, oh, I can trust you because you're friends with Xie Lian, I'm friends with Xie Lian, etc. I also like to think that maybe, even though Mei Nianqing looks like a 27-year-old, everyone there kind of understands he's older. And I like to think it would be really funny if Qi Ying could sense that Mei Nianqing is actually an old man and was like, you're the oldest person here. You're probably responsible here. And just gave the corpse to him and he was like, ah! I love that. I think that's really, really funny. And then I really liked Anime Annie pointing out this big difference between Pei Ming and Shi Wudu and kind of their sins, as has been pointed out throughout the series. The thing that Anime Annie notes is that Pei Ming just wanted to cover up and protect Pei Su after the crimes had already occurred. Pei Su is the one responsible. The deaths are on his hands, and Pei Ming just wanted to help cover it up. Whereas Shi Wudu knew that Heshan's family and himself were going to be basically destroyed by swapping the fates with his brother, but he did it anyway. Like, it wasn't an aftermath thing, and all of the deaths are on Shi Wudu's head, unlike what is going on with Pei Ming and Pei Su. So I thought that was really important to bring out and discuss. I really appreciate that. There's still not a manhwa chapter. I don't know what Billy's doing, but it's stuck on chapter 101. I don't know if their translators just took a holiday for this time of year. Maybe that's it. They just went on holiday and they're like, we'll be back at the start of the year. Bye. So I've penciled it in for next week. We'll see if it happens. But I don't know. I was like, okay, I guess we'll find out. I don't know. I may just have to push the manhwa back and then just see what we do about that. So if anything, I'll talk to if I get finished with Heaven Official's Blessing before the manhwa volume that Star Ember is doing finishes, then I will just talk to it about on Discord. So if you're on the Patreon and you're on the Discord for the MXTX channel, then we can continue talking about it there, right? I feel like that's going to be the case. So that's exciting. But yeah, y'all, I'm really excited to crack open volume 8 and see what we get. But I'm just hoping it's a good Christmas New Year's gift, because last chapter set, Qi Rong is apparently gone. So it's like we got to enjoy him for a hot second and then away he goes. I like in the Donghua this week, Qi Rong is going to appear, and in this week he's disappeared from the novel. I'm like, how did we time this? How did this line up? How did the stars align? What is this? But in any case, y'all, we'll just have to see what we get. But we're going to be looking at chapter 231 to 234 of Heaven Official's Blessing. The first 4 chapters of the book. Usually the first couple chapters are a fun time, so hopefully that's the case. But we're going to find out here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 231, Adroit Dice, Snake Eyes Rolled, Alarming the Heart, Part 3. Yeah, we're just going to pick up where we left off. Oh my God. Within the darkness, that figure took a step forward and was finally revealed into the firelight. Mu Qing's face was dark, but he didn't speak. Function grabbed onto Xie Lian. Before, at the heavenly capital, I was searching for people just fine when someone suddenly struck me from behind. Otherwise, why would I have fallen? Xie Lian's mind spun rapidly and he blinked. He was the one that struck you? Function said with absolute certainty. Without a doubt, it was him. And after he hit you, you were immediately knocked out, Xie Lian said. Pretty much, Function said. Either way, your highness, watch out for him. Don't get so close, or just seize him. Mu Qing swore in spite of himself. Bullshit. Xie Lian quickly cut in. Wait, Fengshen, there's a problem here. If he ambushed you from behind and you were knocked down immediately afterwards, how did you know that the one who struck you from behind was Mu Qing? Function hadn't expected he'd ask this question, was taken aback. Mu Qing instantly seized that moment and humped. At the time, the heavenly capital was ablaze in chaos. It wouldn't be strange for anyone to have knocked you out. But you just had to throw this mess on me. Can't you just admit you saw wrong? But Function held on to Xie Lian and stood up, his tone dark. No, it was definitely you. And on what basis do you make this accusation? Mu Qing demanded. Function enunciated. It was precisely because the heavenly capital was ablaze, and there was firelight all over the ground. It reflected the shadow of that person behind me. Even though I didn't get a chance to look back, when I fell, I saw the shape of the shadow and the attack move. It was your shadow. Xie Lian watched intently as the two exchanged verbal blows. Is this going to be like another Bai Wusheng thing where they're both Bai Wusheng and they're trying to like get Xie Lian trapped again? Mu Qing still wouldn't back down. All this talk, but you still didn't see anything with your own eyes. It's normal for shadows to blur reality. So how can you determine it was me just by a shadow? What can you see when you were practically feigning? You know very well whether I could tell the distinction. His Highness, too, Function said. Xie Lian indeed knew. No matter what, the three of them grew up together, cultivated together, and couldn't be more familiar with each other's form and moves. Even if they didn't see a face, they could still be over 80% certain. Your Highness, you both came here together, Function questioned. Has he done anything suspicious en route? Well, Xie Lian said. To be honest, Mu Qing had been extremely suspicious the entire way, nervous and unsteady. But in their current situation, it wasn't easy for Xie Lian to say so in front of Mu Qing's face. Function continued, no, think closely. The fact that he even came is suspicious. By his personality, why would he go through the danger to come rescue people? Is that even Mu Qing? Mu Qing's face grew darker. Don't say things like they're absolute. Having a son isn't something you do, yet here we are. Xie Lian could sense the direction of this conversation that it was going and quickly said, all right, don't argue. If you continue to argue, then we'll have to train idioms to calm down. Mu Qing added, besides, if it was me who knocked you out, why would I go through all this effort to lure them over here to find you? Function responded, because you didn't think that after you struck me from behind that I could still point you out. And who knows what hellish place this is. Even with you luring His Highness and the others here, they might not be able to find me. Didn't Crimson Rainsop Flower separate from you halfway? Are you trying to call me a fake in order to lure His Highness and the others into a perilous trap? Well, sorry. His Highness and Crimson Rainsop Flower have been with me the entire way. There's no way they wouldn't have noticed anything. That's true, yes, Xie Lian said. But that was only true for the Mu Qing en route. After they had entered the underground Wuyang Palace, who was to say he hadn't switched? Nothing could be sure. Mu Qing looked over to Function and added, Your Highness, I think you best stay away from him. After all, he's been lying there since we came. Crimson Rainsop Flower has also vanished, and now he's trying to tear us apart. Don't you think he's the one more like an imposter? The white no-face disguised himself in appearance of those two before, so to do so again wouldn't be surprising. Xie Lian rubbed his forehead. How about this? Why don't you two say something that only the three of us know so we can verify identities? Like what? Mu Qing asked. Xie Lian gave it a thought and said casually, On top of the snowy mountain, what did you two scream at each other? Ah! Yes! Yes! Okay, you bitch, you better give us answers. After he gave the suggestion, the face of the other two froze. Xie Lian tucked his hands in his sleeves. If your words don't match each other's, then that means someone between you isn't the real thing. Let's verify identities before anything else. However, those two only looked at each other, neither speaking a word. Xie Lian wasn't really that curious at first, but now he couldn't help but be so. A moment later, Fengshen dodged a question. Well, you're both missing the point. I wasn't suspicious that he isn't the real thing. Mu Qing narrowed his eyes. So what are you trying to say? Function said straightforwardly, I thought he's the real Mu Qing from the beginning. He can't stand the both of us, so it wouldn't be strange for him to do anything. Mu Qing's hand clenched into fists, his knuckles cracking. He flicked his hand, sending a blow right out. Function was wounded and just barely dodged the blow, and thus the two started brawling. Although Xie Lian had expected, he couldn't help but feel his head throb. Calm down, why don't we train some idioms, With their blows, Xie Lian could sense that the murderous aura all around was growing heavier. A few balls of firelight flew around haphazardly, brightening the entire chamber, and only then did Xie Lian see that all around the walls there were shelves stacked high with various sabers, spears, swords, and other weapons, exceedingly chilling. Oh, it was an armory! No wonder the air was filled with cold, murderous aura all around. Oh, interesting! Xie Lian himself used to own such an armory. Oh my God, very near and dear to his heart, and he'd often lose track of time while visiting it. But this armory made him feel extremely uncomfortable, and he didn't want to stay here another minute. But he didn't know whose words to trust, so he didn't know which side to help. Truth be told, they were both very suspicious. In the end, he could only call out Ruyi. Bind both of them first and talk later. Oh my God, we have things to talk about already. Ruyi, who'd been waiting, finally got a chance to show off, and out it flew. Yet unexpectedly, before the white silk band ever came out, Xie Lian suddenly sensed another chill permeating from behind him. The direction of this attack instantly changed. He caught onto Ruyi and swung behind. The moment he felt the white silk band catching onto something, Xie Lian seized Ruyi and yanked forcefully, but whatever it was didn't move. Xie Lian felt dread, and the next moment, he was yanked in by the other end of Ruyi. His back solidly crashed into an embrace, and there was something cold and hard that jabbed onto his waist. While his body didn't look that tough, his physical strength was quite formidable. Unless the other party was some gigantic creature, how could he be yanked over so easily? Xie Lian was about to fight back when he felt a hand circle around his waist, and he heard a voice coming from above. Gege, it's me. So long? Xie Lian asked. Sure enough, when he looked down, the hand that circled him was wearing a silver vambrace, carved with maple leaves, butterflies, and beasts. When he whipped his head around, the one who caught him was a tall and slender, red-clad man, calm and collected, a silver scimitar hanging on his waist. The thing that jabbed his waist earlier was most likely a scimitar's hilt! What's wrong? We're not going to comment at all about that. Xie Lian instantly understood. It turns out, just now, it was Ruyi who purposely dragged him to Huachong's side. He was fighting 1 against 2, so of course he was yanked over so easily. He steadied himself and speechlessly picked up Ruyi, muttering, "Oh, you little traitor." Ruyi was wisely playing dead, leg and moving! Oh! Xie Lian didn't want to say any more to it either and threw it aside. Song Long, what happened just now? Weren't you following behind me? Where's Master? This place is very weird, Huachong said. Halfway through, the road back was all sealed. We bumped into something a little difficult, so taking care of it took some time. Even Huachong said it was a little difficult, so it seemed it was really somewhat difficult. Xie Lian felt faintly worried. Are you all right? Of course, Huachong said. But the Goshi's whereabouts are now unknown, so we may have to keep going deeper. By the way, what are those two fighting about? They're so noisy. Oh, them! Xie Lian looked over. On the side, Feng Xin and Mu Qing had also finally noticed things on this end, and Mu Qing immediately shouted, Hey, watch out! Don't go near people who just pop out of nowhere so easily! Those two temporarily called a truce, and Feng Xin also said, Your Highness, don't just glomp him! Don't just glomp him the moment you see him! Xie Lian immediately explained, Well, what do you mean by that? I was the one who tackled him. It was Rui's fault! He trailed off as he suddenly realized why they were so nervous. Since both Feng Xin and Mu Qing were suspicious of imposters, then wouldn't Huachong be no different? Was the one standing before him the real Huachong? Huachong cocked an eyebrow. So now you're all doubting whether or not I'm the real thing, are you? Xie Lian had one hand support his elbow, while the other hand supported his cheek as he started to observe him carefully. Huachong noticed his gaze and stared back at him. Xie Lian couldn't help observing any more at that stare, and after a moment of contemplation, he came to his conclusion and turned to the other two. I think this is the real one. Mu Qing was exasperated. What do you think might not be right? Don't forget where we are. This is White No-Face's old lair. Anything is possible. Figure out a way yourself to test it. Huachong, on the other hand, chuckled. Well, that's easy. Gege, come over here. I'll tell you a good way that they can help you judge immediately. Xie Lian thus listened to him and went over, requesting for his guidance guiltily. What good way? Can you please not do everything he tells you to do? He's the one who's suspicious right now. Do you understand? Huachong said, Recite to me the first half of my communication array verbal password, and I'll tell you the second half, and you'll know whether I'm the real thing. The two whispered in each other's ear for a bit, and Xie Lian turned around, lightly clearing his throat, saying to the other two, Well, this one's the real one. Feng Xin finally didn't look to be as tense anymore, but Mu Qing was doubtful. Are you sure? Don't just look at his face and suddenly lose all your marbles. I already said this one is the real one for sure. Why do you both have to say it like I'm some... Xie Lian griped. All right, it's solved and over, Huachong said. Back on topic. Gege, just why were these two fighting? Xie Lian gave a brief account using his hand to support his forehead. And that's about it. To be honest, I really don't know who's more suspicious. However, Huachong replied, Do you even have to ask? Of course, he's the most suspicious one. The direction he was gesturing at was Mu Qing. Mu Qing was very vexed. If you're going to accuse me for nothing, at least have a reason. Don't throw everything onto me when something happens. Fine, Huachong said. Then let me ask you a question. What's that on your wrist? Hearing this, Mu Qing's face immediately changed color. He staggered back a few steps, but Feng Xin was fast and instantly seized him. On your wrist? There was a curse shackle on his wrist. Mu Qing pushed off Feng Xin's hand, veins popping on his forehead, and he glared at him in fury. When Xie Lian saw the thing, he dropped his arms and said definitely, Mu Qing, your hand. Mu Qing was unspeaking, his face dark. Huachong said, I suggest you respond honestly to all of the following questions. Why did Junwu summon you to the Great Hall? Yes. What did he say to you? Why did you receive better treatment than the other heavenly officials and could return without harm? Why are you behaving so abnormally, volunteering to come rescue people despite all the dangers here at Mount Tonglu? What's with that thing on your hand? Why did you lure us here? Seeing the situation going downhill, Mu Qing backed a step away and instantly said, Wait, don't attack first, let me explain myself. Huachong gave an open gesture. Please, go on. Feng Xin said, Tell me first, were you the one who struck me? After a pause, Mu Qing finally said through gritted teeth, Technically it was me, but it's not what you're all thinking. Feng Xin was angered, but Xie Lian said, Let him continue. Oh, I'm so glad. Every time I get a little bit worried, Huachong shows back up and he's like, Let's settle this. Come on now, spill the tea, Mu Qing. Mu Qing inhaled deeply and admitted, That's right, I was the one who hurt Feng Xin. Feng Xin was outraged. I knew it was definitely you. Mu Qing turned to Xie Lian, but that was because the heavenly capital was done for. At the time, all the heavenly officials were trying to find ways to escape, but he still stayed there refusing to leave, and he wouldn't listen when called either. If he continued to stand around, the place would have been burnt to death by the flames of karma sooner or later, which is why I planned on knocking him out before tossing him to you. But you didn't hand him to me. Feng Xin went missing and ended up here instead. Because a little accident happened on the way, Mu Qing said. What accident? The fetus spirit, Mu Qing said. It suddenly ambushed me from behind, biting me, not letting go, refusing to let me take him. I hadn't had the chance to pull him up before the heavenly capital started reshaping, so Function was somehow moved here along with the piece of land beneath him. If that was the truth, then it meant Mu Qing had the intention to do a good deed, but accidentally made things worse and screwed Function over. A very awkward situation. Well, why didn't you say so sooner? Function was also dubious. Are you sure you didn't plan on letting me burn to death at the heavenly capital to just knock me out and leave me there? Mu Qing's face stiffened and he turned to Xie Lian. The fetus spirit was crouching on his chest the entire time. And later that female ghost Xie Lian came too, so I figured she would wake or move Function instead of watching him get burnt. Xie Lian then understood. Mu Qing had come to rescue him out of guilt. After all, he was the one who knocked out Feng Xin. Out of a sense of responsibility, naturally, he had to put in some effort. No wonder he was so nervous and on the edge the entire way. He probably was scared, wondering whether Feng Xin might have died. Yet the set of excuses was hard to believe. Feng Xin was pulling at his hair madly. What a mess have you made of things! Don't you know I was looking for them? If you didn't knock me out, maybe I could have found them. Mu Qing said calmly, the fetus spirit is White No-Face's subordinate. White No-Face wouldn't do anything malicious to them. And they didn't want to go with you, so you staying behind is just a waste of time. You can call for them 1,000 times and it'd be pointless, so why not leave the heavenly capital, save your life first, then find opportunities later to go look for them? Why must you force something like recognizing sons during such a dire situation? I only made the best possible decision for all the parties at that moment. Function wasn't as calm as he was. Best possible decision, my ass. You can only say that because it's not your family. Wait, so what you mean to say is you were trying to save me and make me leave? But Hua Changkinen, that's enough rubbish. Just answer my question. What did Junwu say to you? Mu Qing shut up and was somewhat hesitant. Hua Chang stared at him. Are you currently under his command? Mu Qing instantly replied, nothing of the sort. Then explain this cursed shackle, Hua Chang said. Mu Qing had been arguing for so long his mouth was dry. A moment later he said with a hoarse voice, I already said you guys might not believe me. Earlier when we asked you, you denied everything to death. Only now do you admit it, so of course it's going to be hard to believe you, Function said. Mu Qing was slightly indignant. Why didn't I admit it? If I told you earlier what had happened, you definitely would not have believed me anyway. With this attitude, who'd admit it to anything? The moment I admit to anything, I wouldn't be able to explain myself at all, so I might as well not have admitted to anything at all. Besides, obviously, having nothing happen to Feng Xin was unfortunate. But the whole incident was rather embarrassing. By his personality, not wanting to admit it was also normal. Xie Lian had been listening to him patiently the whole time and said, just let him finish. Mu Qing glanced at Xie Lian and took a moment before he said staggeringly, with difficulty, this is because he wanted me to do detrimental things to His Highness, and I refused. So, at this point, he himself felt uncomfortable and couldn't continue any longer. Hua Chang continued for him. So, in a fit of anger, he put a curse shackle on you? Mu Qing didn't speak. Nothing else? Feng Xin demanded. There was nothing particularly notable in Hua Chang's expression. From the bottom of your heart, do you believe the words that you just said? It was as if Mu Qing had suffered a great humiliation, and he said coldly, believe if you will. There's a misunderstanding in me knocking Feng Xin out, but I'm not under anyone's command. Feng Xin responded, Mu Qing, you best just tell the truth. When Mu Qing saw his expression, his knuckles cracked. What I said was the truth. What did you want to hear? That I surrendered to Junwu and I'm out to hurt you all? Is that the person I am in your minds? Your Highness! He gazed at Xie Lian, his eyes emotional. Xie Lian stared at him for a long time, pensive the whole time, but just as he was about to speak, Hua Chang crossed his arms and shielded in front of him, meeting Mu Qing's eyes. He spoke quietly. There's no need to look at His Highness like this. After all, you've got a track record. I didn't ask you, Mu Qing countered. What track record? Hua Chang smiled. What track record? How did cultivation go for you after stealing a piece of auspicious land from His Highness's hands? His smile was laced with chilling air, his tone even nastier. Oh, we bringing this out in the open! Mu Qing was taken aback, his face paling, and he involuntarily staggered a few steps back. You! Mu Qing himself knew that incident with fighting Xie Lian over auspicious land wasn't an ethical thing to do. Thus, he was fearful of people bringing it out in the open to point their fingers at it. While Huachuang's tone was light, his tone was forceful and vicious. Mu Qing was surprised, but Xie Lian was too. What he was surprised about was, how did Huachuang know about the incident? Neither Xie Lian nor Feng Xin were the gossipy type. They never enjoyed debating right or wrong behind people's backs or spreading any rumors. While at the time Mu Qing's departure was a huge shock to them, they never said anything or complained to anyone about it. As for the fight over the piece of auspicious land, afterwards Xie Lian never mentioned it again and never spoke of it to anyone either. He was sure Feng Xin was the same. Those 30-some heavenly officials naturally wouldn't have voluntarily told anyone they stole another spiritual land for cultivation. So they would have either kept everything in complete secret or twisted the truth. Thus, afterwards, Xie Lian had never heard talk of that incident again. So if that was the case, how had Huachuang learned of it? Even if he had planted many spies in the heavenly court, their affair really was much too long ago. If it had been some 800 years, and most of those involved never said a single word, how is it really possible for Huachuang to have dug out this aged mess? I hope he tells them! Mu Qing questioned, and how did you know about that? Who told you? He looked at Feng Xin, then at Xie Lian, and in the end, the one he peered at was still Xie Lian. Huachuang jeered, there's no need to look at His Highness. His Highness never tells me any of those things. This was something you both yelled about at the top of the snowy mountain. Did you forget? Oh, Mu Qing's face was turning paler. Xie Lian's confusion was somewhat lessened, and he couldn't help but sweat drop. When Feng Xin and Mu Qing started going at each other's throat, they'd often revive old quarrels like mad and crazily pull rugs from each other's feet. They would have definitely bundled age-old messes like dynamite and hurled them at each other. No wonder Huachuang was angry at the time. But Xie Lian still vaguely felt there was something deeper than that. Ah, okay, all right, now it's all coming together. Because Xie Lian remembered another thing. The red-clad ghost and the burning of the civil and martial temples. Huachuang became famous overnight. After the one battle where he defeated 33 heavenly officials and a blazing fire scorched all the temples and shrines they had in the mortal realm. Xie Lian had long forgotten how many heavenly officials there were who fought him over the auspicious land. Even their titles, faces, and words they said were lost to him. He only vaguely recalled that maybe there was 30 of them. Then, what was the count exactly? Could it be the 30-some heavenly officials from back then? If it was, then didn't this mean Huachuang had long since known about the incident? It was a moment before Mu Qing gritted out, that time is that time, and this time is this time. In any case, I have never thought of, just as they were arguing, suddenly one of Xie Lian's legs kicked out and he shouted, watch out! Mu Qing wasn't expecting this at all and was instantly kicked down. There was a whoosh and two sharp, chilling bursts of air brushed past him, nailing onto the wall. Mu Qing leapt to his feet and dusted the footprint on his chest. Are you doing this on purpose, attacking first? Xie Lian replied while his mind was occupied. I'm sorry, that wasn't really intentional. If it had been intentional, Mu Qing would have crashed into a human-shaped hole in the wall. Everyone turned their heads to look, and upon the wall there were two sharp swords impaled, their blades still vibrating. Feng Xin shouted, who's there? There's no one there, Xie Lian said. They moved on their own. There was clinks and clunks and clanks, and from all around them a murderous aura exploded. The weapons that hung on the wall became aggravated, violently shaking, so much the entire chamber was clamoring from the quaking. We need to get out of here, quick, Xie Lian exclaimed. Yet unexpectedly, when he dashed to the entrance that used to be, Feng Xin shouted, why are you running there? There's no path over there. Where's the door? The chamber couldn't not have a door. How do we get out? There used to be a door, Xie Lian exclaimed, but it's gone. What's going on with those arms? Why did killing intent suddenly explode? Huachuang used two fingers and caught a long sword that came flying at him. Without exerting much force, the sword snapped, crackling into pieces onto the ground. He said it's been too long since anyone's used them, and they've gotten lonely. When they sense people come in, they want to kill. That's all. Oh. The other two turned their heads to look at Mu Qing. Mu Qing instantly exclaimed, it's got nothing to do with me! But, Huachuang said, you're the one who led us here. I only pointed this path out because I saw the fetus spirit, Mu Qing countered. Huachuang countered, only you saw it. Mu Qing had nothing to say to that. He clenched his fists. Feng Xin spoke up. Well, what do we do now? Can't those weapons calm themselves? Before Huachuang answered, Xie Lian suddenly remembered how he used to face similar monsters and demons and mumbled, it's possible, but we must let them kill. But there's no exit to this place right now, Function said. And there's only the 4 of us locked up in here. How do we let them kill? What can they kill? Just as Xie Lian was about to speak, HuaChang suddenly said, the 3 of us. What 3? Function questioned. I'm just correcting you, that's all, HuaChang said. The ones locked up here are only the 3 of us. Xie Lian whipped his head around, and sure enough, within the armory, Mu Qing, who used to be the 4th person, had vanished! It was the truth! Where Mu Qing used to stand, there was now nothing but empty air. Oh my god! Oh! Function was dumbfounded. Well, how can this be? He was just standing there. HuaChang wasn't surprised at all, since he had already run into something like this himself earlier. He only said, we're in White No-Face's territory now. Everyone follows his command. He has nothing to fear, so of course he can take people away as he wills. Earlier, when Function didn't wholly believe, the sharp words he exchanged with Mu Qing were uttered mostly out of anger, but now he really didn't know what to say. It was a good moment before he finally said, Your Highness, Mu Qing, could he really have? Xie Lian replied quickly, let's not talk about that right now. These weapons are about to go violent. We have to think of a way to calm them down first, or we'll be chopped to mush. Then he pulled out the feng shin that was carried on his back. However, HuaChang resolutely pressed down on his hand. Xie Lian was taken aback and looked over, and he saw HuaChang staring at him intently, red slowly spreading around the rims of his eyes. He said darkly, Gege, what are you planning? Pulling out a sword. What? Chapter 233, Cliffs hundreds yards high, 1,000 bends over lava falls. That has nothing to do with what's happening right now. What? Xie Lian blinked. I wasn't planning on doing anything. Then why'd you pull out the sword? HuaChang demanded. To defend myself? Xie Lian replied. HuaChang's expression was terrifyingly dark, and he squeezed harder. How do you plan on defending yourself? Put the sword down. This was the first time HuaChang had ever spoken to Xie Lian with this kind of expression and tone, and Xie Lian was completely taken aback. Function was alarmed. Who are you to make him put down his sword? Let him go first. A battle axe came flying, and in one swift reaction, Xie Lian raised the sword and slashed it and sent it flying. How do I plan on defending myself? Well, like this? Only then did HuaChang's demeanor and tone relax somewhat, but he still didn't let him go. You don't need to defend yourself. Just stand behind me. Put your sword down. Function knocked into his bow on the ground with his foot. He picked it up, gripping it with both hands, raising it to use as a sword. He batted away a meteor hammer, all the while becoming more suspicious. What are you doing clutching onto him like that? Are you really the real thing? Your Highness, is there anyone besides you two who knows the Crimson Rainflower's verbal password? It was as though this reminder that Xie Lian suddenly remembered that this wasn't just the 2 of them who knew HuaChang's spiritual communication verbal password. There was a 3rd person who'd heard it before. Junwu. Back at the Palace of Shanla, when he made Xie Lian connect with HuaChang in his presence, he had clearly heard it. Oh my god! But Xie Lian still felt the one before him was definitely HuaChang himself, without a doubt. It was just, he seemed to have suddenly remembered something very unpleasant, which is why he acted this way. After a moment of contemplation, Xie Lian replied, all right. And he put Feng Shin away. The next moment, silver light flashed out and the scimitar was unsheathed. The moment Ming had come out, the entire armory was instantly enveloped in a silver light. Sparks flew incessantly, and the sound of metal cracking reverberated and echoed non-stop in the ears. Xie Lian and Feng Shin stood unmoving, entrapped in the center by this chaotic, chilling, killing aura. After 10 blows, HuaChang turned around, resheathing the scimitar. Xie Lian's gaze moved from his person to the ground. All those hundreds of weapons from before had been slashed to specks by Ming. So if he was holding Feng Shin, would it have attacked him too? Xie Lian crouched down and picked up 2 fragmented pieces of sword, feeling grave pity. Oh, they were all such good rare weapons. Oh my god, Xie Lian, now's not the time! Just then Feng Shin spoke up. Your Highness, the door, an extra door has appeared. Xie Lian dropped the fragmented pieces and stood up. I see. So we can only leave after the weapons were dealt with. Originally, the doors should have required blood to be spilt for them to open, but HuaChang had forced them to open directly. Just as Xie Lian was thinking this, HuaChang took his hand and started dragging him out the door. Seeing that he was boiling with murderous intent, Feng Shin questioned, what do you both plan on doing next? Obviously, to go find the Goshi and Mu Qing. HuaChang stated calmly, if Mu Qing really surrendered himself to Junwu, then I'll take his shit life first. The 3 exited the armory and walked for a while. Xie Lian hesitated for a bit, but in the end he still asked, San Long, Did you think I was going to stab myself earlier? HuaLian didn't respond, but his expression was extremely sour. Xie Lian added, I wouldn't have. Really? Xie Lian felt guilty after that look. To be honest, if this was the past, perhaps if the situation was truly dire, he would have just really solved it like that. But now, he would never again. Oh. Xie Lian replied, yes, I promised you. Besides, there were so many sabers, spears, and swords. If they all stabbed me, won't I have been stabbed to mush? He started to laugh, but then he couldn't laugh anymore because when he said the word stab, HuaLian abruptly turned to stare at him. That gaze was hard to describe, but it stumped all the words Xie Lian had to say. Then HuaLian suddenly reached out and pressed him into his arms. Function was bringing up the rear, was shaking. Oh, what the fuck? I'm still here! Xie Lian blinked and patted HuaLian's back. What is it? HuaLian whispered, Your Highness, please don't laugh like that anymore. He hugged Xie Lian tightly. It's not funny, really. It's not funny at all. He recalled before when he picked up those skull bones covered with the corpse poison and how HuaLian's face then was already that unpleasant. Xie Lian felt apologetic. Oh, I'm sorry. I won't joke about this with you again. I just didn't want you to worry, but I didn't think it'd have the opposite effect. Function looked as if he was startled by this mood and was flabbergasted for a while. I agree too, since he's so serious about it. HuaLian finally let Xie Lian go and said quietly, let's go. Oh, damn it! Without the Goshi to lead the way, other than continuing deep into the palace, the three had no other choice. But they hadn't been walking for very long before Xie Lian sensed something unusual in the air. Don't you think it's gotten hotter? Xie Lian said. When the group of them first entered the underground palace, it was haunting and chilling, but after walking for a while, the air seemed to have swelled, growing much more humid and hot. Function seemed to have felt the same. When he turned his head, he was slightly taken aback before raising his hand to point. Your Highness, look behind! There's some kind of light! Just as he said, there was light behind them, slowly encroaching. Oh no! The unknown light source appeared to be pitch black in the underground. It was a rather peculiar situation. Had someone come? It's the lava, damn it! No! As they waited for the light to reveal its true appearance, Xie Lian finally noticed it wasn't his imagination that the air underground had turned hot. A scarlet and gold lava stream, rolling and bubbling, came flowing down the hill, crawling towards the three. The lava had flowed into the underground palace along the watercourse. Xie Lian was just crying, oh no, inwardly, when suddenly he sensed something behind rapidly dashing past. Instantly, he threw his hand and the silk band whipped out. Hold it, we just need to ask for directions. That man had just barely dodged, his form halting for a moment. Using the firelight of the lava stream not far away, they saw the man's face, and Function shouted, Mu Qing, you bastard, stop right there! As if Mu Qing would stop. Without another word, he broke off into a run. The three were just about to give chase and strike when the ground shook violently. The scarlet gold lava suddenly surged and spread over the watercourse, spreading with great speed and rushing straight towards them. The three were about to be forced from their footing, but Xie Lian had already encountered this problem prior to them coming in here. The level of difficulty was just slightly higher, that's all. He said, Function, there's probably many empty-shelled mutants in the lava, and they can float, so just step on them and you won't sink. Then he targeted an empty-shelled mutant that was vigorously paddling its arms in the lava flow, and he leapt up! Once he landed, Xie Lian was delighted. The empty-shelled mutants' heads seemed to be particularly bigger, and even when he stepped down, they actually only dipped slightly and could still float on the surface of the lava stream without sinking. As long as they didn't start anything, they could easily be used as canoes. What? Function also targeted one and leapt on, pointing his bow at the empty-shelled mutant. Swim properly, don't sink! With the threat of a weapon, as expected, the empty-shelled lava mutant didn't dare offend him and worked even harder. Meanwhile, HuaLian only crossed his arms and gave a look down, and the empty-shelled mutant became settled, not daring to do anything wicked, going full power, swimming the fastest. Oh my God. As for Xie Lian, he clapped his hands together in a prayer and very sincerely negotiated with that empty-shelled mutant. Take me for this ride. Please take me for this ride. I'll burn you incense afterwards. Don't you want incense? Then what offerings do you want? Just let me know! The empty-shelled mutant was obviously extremely dissatisfied and would time and time again swing its arms trying to chase him off, but Xie Lian was as sticky as gum, and even if he tumbled, he refused to be flung. Needless to say, Xie Lian had once again found the most difficult one to deal with. Just his luck, right? The three rode the mutants and flowed down with the current. As if they were rafting, the further down the stream they went, the steeper the hills became and the faster the speed. They also had to dodge obstacles that abruptly rose from the lava stream time and time again, and the entire journey was full of endless perils. A while later, they finally caught up to Mu Qing, who was ahead. Function yelled, "Mu Qing, where are you running off to?" Beneath Mu Qing's feet was another empty-shelled mutant being used as a surfboard, and he looked back. "Well, what? And I should wait until you all attack me together? Oh my god, you're so insecure, Mu Qing!" There was only a bow in Function's hands and no arrow, and he could only shout through the air, "We won't attack you. Explain first how you suddenly disappeared from the armory." "You all," Mu Qing looked back sneering. Before he finished, Xie Lian saw what laid ahead, his pupils shrinking rapidly, and he shouted, "Ahead of you!" Mu Qing instantly turned back, and only then did he discover the path ahead was coming to an abrupt end. There was probably an underground chasm here before, and that drop is extremely steep. At least 100 yards, like a gigantic cliff. He'd never expected a change in landscape like this would appear so abruptly. Plus, the further downhill he went, the faster the lava stream flowed. By the time he came to his senses, he'd already been thrown into the air unprepared. Mu Qing's figure, along with the empty-shelled mutant under his feet, instantly disappeared. And the three of them over on this end were also about to rapidly rush to the edge of the cliff. At the last second, HOOOO flew out towards the back and wrapped itself a few times around the eaves of a palace building in the distance, then tied itself into a knot. It doesn't like that, but it'll do it to save them. With one hand gripping HOOOO and the other grabbing HuaQing, Xie Lian tossed the other end of HOOOO towards Function and yelled, "Catch!" With the silk band as the link, the three clumsily steadied themselves. At that moment, they were at most about 20 feet from the cliff. If they had been late by another step, they would have fallen. They had literally stopped their horses at the precipice. However, there was still rolling lava pouring down nonstop, and Xie Lian ordered, "Withdraw!" HOOOO shrank rapidly and withdrew the three in the direction of the palace. Soon after, the three leapt onto the roof of the palace. This palace was bigger, so its roof was considerably spacious. With stones as the foundation, there was no fear of it being washed away by the lava, so having landed here, they could temporarily breathe in relief. After steadying himself for a moment, Function watched the empty cliff dumbfoundedly and said in disbelief, "Did Mu Qing fall?" Xie Lian forced himself to slow his thumping heart and panted a breath, wiping away the beads of sweat on his forehead. He didn't! Peering over the furthest edge of the rooftop of that palace, Xie Lian poked out and could see that on the rocks on the edge of that cliff, there was a long saber nailed in. A pair of hands were tightly clutching the long hilt of that saber, and under those hands was a flustered, red face vigorously gritting his teeth. At this moment, Mu Qing was situated in the horrifying position of being parallel to the waterfall-like lava stream flowing downwards. Beads of fire were splashing before his face. It was truly fire burning the brows, an idiom meaning a desperate or critical situation, and also literal in this context. If it wasn't for the layer of spiritual light protecting his body and blocking out the majority of the stream, his entire appearance would have been burnt away, and his head would have been ablaze by now. But this protection of spiritual light wouldn't last for long, and if his entire person was to fall in the pool of lava, his bones would still dissolve into the air. This was such a terrifying scene, and Function questioned, "What should we do? Your Highness, can that white silk band of yours reach him?" Xie Lian had already given it an attempt, withdrawing HOOOO and patting off the flames. It can't. The distance is too far. HOOOO caught on fire midway. Many small broken threads of flames were also singeing Mu Qing's robes, and the hilt was scorching hot. Yet he still gripped on hard, afraid to let go, afraid to look down. If he was to let go, then it was nothing but blazing flames and lava awaiting him down below. There was also the hungry wailing of countless spirits of the deceased, their cries resounding and echoing, as if they were calling for the ones struggling, hanging on for dear life above, to hurry and join them in companionship. Mu Qing held onto that hilt in a deadly grip, his pale forehead covered in heavy sweat. When he saw the three in the distance, his lips moved like he wanted to call for help. But with his personality, it was really difficult to have the words "help" and "save me" leave his lips. Besides, whether HuaQing was free or not, he probably wouldn't have cared to come save him. It was hard to tell with Function, too. The only one left who would be willing to rescue him, had the ability to save him, and could pursue and persuade the other two was Xie Lian. In the end, he fervently pulled up, veins popping slightly on his forehead as he shouted towards Xie Lian, "Your Highness!" Xie Lian was just scanning the area, making rapid observations when he heard the call and looked to him. Mu Qing held it for a good while, Then sucking in a breath, he yelled with a red face, "Believe me, Your Highness, you know I wasn't lying, don't you? You know I wouldn't have really harmed any of you, right?" The way he was begging Xie Lian, so full of hope, like he was hanging on to the last thread of his life, suddenly made Xie Lian remember another scene from another time. That time when dusk was falling many, many years ago, when he too begged Mu Qing with the same desperate hope. "You know I wasn't lying, right?" How had Mu Qing answered him back then? He hadn't thought of those things for hundreds of years, but this line Mu Qing used suddenly dragged them out from the dusty corners where they were sealed away. Dragged out and broke loose, countless images and voices flashed by, and only then did Xie Lian realize that he remembered every detail so very clearly that he had not forgotten. Mu Qing never received his answer, and in Xie Lian's unusual silence, he seemed to have gradually remembered the same scene. The colors of his face slowly changing, it appeared that he also figured out that he had used the wrong words to call for help, and unintentionally reminded Xie Lian of what he shouldn't have been reminded at a time like this. Only then, HuaLian spoke up quietly behind Xie Lian. "Gege, before you make your decision, I have to remind you of a couple things." Only then did Xie Lian snap out of it and said, "What is it?" "First," HuaLian said, "unless the lava stream stops flowing, making a rescue attempt will be life-threateningly dangerous." But who knows when it would stop flowing? That saber hilt was already scorchingly red hot, and Mu Qing's hand wouldn't be able to grip it for much longer. How could he possibly hang on until then? Xie Lian was quiet. HuaLian continued, "Second, if Mu Qing has already surrendered to Junwu, then Junwu will definitely have a way to get him out of here. But you will definitely fall into danger, and this possibility is great. Think about his behavior and the way he acted this entire trip. Knocking Function out, luring them to the armory, refusing to admit he knocked Function out, and even made accusations back, suddenly disappearing after the army went berserk, the coincidental timing of the lava stream reversing its flow, bringing them to where they are now. And now, was he perhaps once again purposely leading Xie Lian to his end? This is so crazy! What? I'm glad we have one chapter left, thank God. Cliffs over 100 yards high, 1,000 bends over lava flow, part 2. Xie Lian's silence was becoming a bit long. That long saber hilt was burning red hot, and Mu Qing let out a long shout. A hand dropping, and he hung for a while, using only the other hand. He didn't dare support himself up like that for too long and immediately clutched on again. However, the palms of both his hands were smoking strings of white vapor, and while there was a long distance between them, those on the other side could almost smell the stench of burnt flesh. HuaLian casually let loose a silver butterfly. The silver butterfly fluttered its wings, flying out for 100 feet before it reached even 1/3 of the way to Mu Qing. It dissipated into silver smoke and vanished in the air. Xie Lian knew that he was demonstrating that the wraith butterflies could not help. It was a dead end, not worth dying for. Mu Qing also witnessed the vanishing process of the silver butterfly, his expression gradually turning to one of despair. He understood. Right now, first, there was no one who had the ability to save him, and second, no one believed him. And on the grounds of his choice of words triggering the certain memories, there was no reason at all for Xie Lian to come pull him up to risk his own life. But while despairing, he refused to yield, and he was unwilling to give up. Mu Qing gritted his teeth, shouting, "If you don't believe me, that's fine, but I'll never fall that easily." Then he gripped hard, seeming to attempt a mid-air spin to stand on the hilt, yet unexpectedly, just as his body lifted a few inches, it violently sank. Mu Qing looked down, and in the eyes reflected countless resentful spirits that were melded onto the color of blood red. Their faces and limbs contorted and twisted as they pressed themselves onto his leg, pulling him down. The resentful spirits were originally melted into the flowing lava, but they had popped out, hanging off his lower body one after the other. Heavy and boiling hot, like adding oil to the fire, frost upon snow, Mu Qing was going mad. Get lost! In the past centuries, it wasn't like he had never faced death. But those were all circumstances where he was heavily wounded. To die buried in lava was 1,000 times more horrifying than death by injury. The moment he imagined himself turning into a wisp of smoke like that wraith butterfly, leaving the world without a trace, he couldn't stand it. At last, Mu Qing's hand had reached their limit, and his 10 fingers loosened, no longer able to grip on. The space between the saber turned empty, and he had fallen. The silhouette of a figure was plunging downwards to the blazing fires and lava pool below. He screamed, however, while his screams were fervent and tormented. After his body had dropped for some distance, the fall came to a violent halt, and he was hung in midair. Mu Qing hadn't come yet to his senses, half his head numb. But because his indistinctive reaction was still intact, he quickly felt his body. It turns out it was a white silk band that wrapped itself around his waist. It naturally was Ruyi, but that palace where Xie Lian perched was nowhere near the cliff where he fell. If Ruyi couldn't reach over earlier, how could it have caught him after he'd fallen for a while? Mu Qing gazed upward and discovered in shock that Xie Lian wasn't on top of the roof of that palace at all. He was right above his own head. Earlier, Mu Qing had nailed the long saber into the rocks and gripped the hilt in order to hang on for some time. At this moment, Xie Lian was half crouched upon that hilt. Xie Lian was rapidly withdrawing Ruyi as he looked down, and he only let out a breath of relief when he saw that Mu Qing was all right. Oh, thank goodness, I made it in time. Mu Qing muttered, Your Highness. That instant earlier was overly stimulating, so much that his mind was still mush and confused. At such a far distance with rolling lava en route, without any other landing points, at most Xie Lian could have only jumped halfway, so how had he come over right now? In the distance, Feng Shen's voice rang out. Your Highness, are you both all right? Mu Qing looked to the sound, and upon the roof of the palace, now only HuaChang and Feng Shen remained. HuaChang was watching them with his arms crossed, seeming to be ensuring Xie Lian's safety, uncaring of anything else. And in the middle, between the 2 points of that palace and the cliffside where he fell, there was an ink-black sword, coldly wedged and standing in the center of the incessantly flowing hot lava. Feng Shen, that was it. Mu Qing understood how Xie Lian came over. What symbolism! Oh my god! By Xie Lian's ability to jump, he indeed could only jump halfway at the most, and would never be able to safely jump all the way to the cliffside where he fell from the rooftop of the palace. Thus, Xie Lian had hurled Feng Shen out first, nailing it in the lava stream to create a landing point. Then, using Feng Shen as another starting point, he leapt onto the saber and released Ruyi at the last second, barely catching him. I was trying to think of a way earlier, and there was really nothing that was helpful, so some time was used, Xie Lian said, but you were also panicking too much. Don't lose your head, otherwise you'll fall faster. Mu Qing had thought Xie Lian's silence was him hesitating over whether or not to save him. But it turns out Xie Lian was instead trying to think of a way how to save him. And thank goodness that Xie Lian could still think with such a clear head in such a dire situation. The beads of sweat on his forehead were rolling thicker. The moment he looked up, Xie Lian extended a hand to him, smiling. In any case, although a little late, this hand isn't extended too late, right? Perhaps because he had been gripping the hilt too long earlier, but Mu Qing suddenly felt his arms incomparably heavy, unable to be raised. Xie Lian then stretched his hand lower. Come on. Mu Qing finally took a hold of his hand. His entire arm was shaking slightly, but Xie Lian yanked forcefully and pulled him up. The two stood together on the hilt of Mu Qing's long saber. Xie Lian turned around and waved towards the roof. So long, it's a success! Very good, Gege, HuaChang replied. Now come back right this instant. Xie Lian responded, all right, I'll be right back. Then he looked to Mu Qing. Can you still jump? If not, I'll take you. Mu Qing's lip moved. Xie Lian observed his disposition, said resolutely, I'll take you. Then he grabbed his back. If this was the past, Mu Qing would have rolled his eyes secretly and protested his grip, griping that he was being disrespectful of others, but now Mu Qing couldn't utter a single word. Xie Lian was just about to leap up unexpectedly. Right then, both of them suddenly felt their footing dip at the same time. If things weren't unfortunate enough, the long saber nailed onto the rocks had just picked this time to loosen. The colors of HuaChang's face immediately changed. Gege! This time it was two figures that were plunging down towards the crimson red lava pool. In such fire-burning ass moments, Xie Lian could still think rapidly. He shouted, it's fine! Then he spun several times in midair, grabbing onto the long saber. With both hands gripping the hilt, he once again nailed the saber onto the rocks. There was a clang and beads of sparks flew, brilliant and dazzling. Over the surface of Xie Lian's protective spiritual light, those particles of fire were like fragmented grains of gold. If that layer of protective spiritual light was gone, even a speck of it could burn a large hole in a person. Ruyi raised Mu Qing up, and Xie Lian said to him solemnly, this saber won't be able to take the weight of two grown men for long. This can't keep up. Between us two, only one can remain here. Mu Qing came to his senses. Are you saying you can go? Xie Lian said. Oh, Mu Qing's pupils slowly shrank, but before he could speak, Xie Lian caught him and threw him forcefully upward, shouting, on your mark! Mu Qing was thrown over the cliff and discovered he was flying over to where Feng Shen stood. He steadied himself, flipping in the air, and landed on the hilt of Feng Shen. After having landed here, he understood why Xie Lian had to throw him up first. It was because, with this distance, perhaps Xie Lian could jump over the hilt that had migrated several dozens of feet down below, but he wouldn't have been able to. This distance for him was too far. He could only have made it by borrowing Xie Lian's hurling force. Feng Shen wiped away his cold sweat. Well, thank goodness your highness reacts fast. However, Huachong was looking severe, and he called out down below, Gege, if you don't come back soon, I'm going to come down there and get you. His voice carried a tone of warning, and Xie Lian replied quickly, oh, I'm coming up now. Things are all right. Not too hard to handle. I can jump over myself. Don't come down. Only then did Huachong's demeanor relax a little, but he still watched with his eyes unblinking. Feng Shen looked at him and couldn't help but say, I'm a little surprised. Huachong didn't turn his head and said without any trace of curiosity, what? Feng Shen scratched his head. I thought, since you're so biased against Mu Qing, you'd think he wasn't worth saving and would be against His Highness rescuing him, preventing him from going. Only then did Huachong give him a look. You're half wrong, half right. What? Huachong said, the first part wasn't wrong. I don't think he's worth saving. How he is none of my business. Seeing his apathetic expression, Feng Shen's sweat dropped. Aren't you a little too blunt? And when he thought how this man most definitely held the same attitude towards him, more sweat rolled. Huachong and snorted, and then after a pause he added, but only His Highness can decide on whatever he chooses. I will never oppose his decisions. Feng Shen had never heard anyone say anything like this before. Not from men to women, and most definitely not from one man to another man. He could only think if Xie Lian had heard this, it was going to be another big deal. Not knowing what face to face, Feng Shen could only reply, ah, I see. Huachong turned his head back, staring at Xie Lian, who was peering at the lava flow in observation, thinking and making up plans, and smiled besides. I already knew he was going to do this. On the other end, Xie Lian called out, Mu Qing, hurry and move to the rooftop. Stop running. If there's really anything, we can talk afterwards. Only then did Mu Qing realize that if he didn't leave Feng Shen, then Xie Lian had nowhere to land for his next step. Forcing himself to think calmly, Mu Qing was about to return to the rooftop when unexpectedly, as he leapt up from down below, Xie Lian suddenly cried out, well, who's there? Xie Lian had been standing on the saber, silently storing energy, when suddenly the lava flows behind him parted. From the falls, a pair of hands stretched out, seizing him abruptly. That creature clearly came from within the lava falls, but those hands were horrifyingly cold. Xie Lian shuddered, and he heard Huachong exclaim from above, Your Highness! Oh, well, son of a bitch! The owner of those hands hugged Xie Lian tightly and fell off the saber, taking him along. Xie Lian was completely dumbfounded, and those above saw clearly what had seized him from behind. Ah! A man was clad in white robes with a half-crying, half-smiling mask on his face, as if he was rejoicing, as if he was grieving. It was the White No-Face! Rui sensed danger and came whipping out on his own, flinging itself upwards and casting itself before Mu Qing. Mu Qing grabbed it unconsciously, but the power from the other end of the white silk band was too great. Not only did he not manage to hold it down, it yanked him down too. Xie Lian was rapidly plunging down amidst fiery sparks, and he heard the creature laugh by his ears. Oh, you're so naive, too naive, Shanla. Did you think it was going to be that easy to achieve a perfect, happy ending? Down below were scorching waves of steam, but his mind was filled with chilling cold. Within the conflicting ice and fire, Xie Lian looked up, and above in the air enveloped in fire and light, there was a looming red silhouette that was fast approaching. Huachong jumped down too, but the lava pool was down below. Hey! What? No! No! Oh, you son of a bitch! No! What? Should we be surprised about the cliffhangers at this point? What, MXTX? It's Christmas and the New Year's, and you're supposed to not give me a major cliffhanger right off the bat! Oh, why? I feel like Snoopy. What the fudge? What is even happening? Oh my god. So, yeah, you know, no big deal. course, what a way to kick off the final volume, right? A huge suspicion from Mu Qing, making us doubt everything, and then Xie Lian and HuaLian have this amazing moment together, and then Bai Wusheng has to show back up again. What the fudge? I feel like it would be interesting to see, and I know we're going to talk about with Reiki after we're done with this volume, to see in the edited version if they condense arcs or change things or make things. I'm not saying MXTX is repetitive by any means, but we do revisit a lot of the same locations. But what's interesting is, what I do like about it is when we revisit the same location again and we go back a second time, it's like the characters and the air around us is different, and the tone is different, and the way that they interact has changed. And so that's all very interesting to me. So we talk about this, like we're going to talk about Mount Tonglu in volume 6, if you can believe it's been that long ago, versus Mount Tonglu now, because there's a lot of similarities and differences. So fun times. Oh my god, and just seeing how these differences are going to play out. But going back to our unresolved plot points, the ring is still there, presumably, and we've not checked. I kept wanting to see in this chapter set if Xie Lian was just going to check the string on the hands. I was like, wouldn't that be an easy way to check if Xie Lian was like, do you have the string like I have the string? But I feel like Xie Lian doesn't want to acknowledge the string, because if Junwoo or Bai Wusheng realizes what it does, they might try to exploit that or damage it or find a way to hurt him. And so he doesn't want to bring it up because he's like, nah, I don't want to deal with that. So that makes sense. Thank God! It's a Christmas miracle! We can get this conversation off the map. Yay! It is a Christmas miracle. Go lay down, Huckleberry. We're not playing right now. No. So it is a Christmas miracle. Oh my god, that feels so good. And they don't directly say what exact words were said. I'm fine with that, but they basically get around to the conversation on top of the mountain was, of course, Fengxian and Mu Qing arguing back and forth. And one of the things that gets hurled out as an insult is the idea of Mu Qing and what he did on top of the mountain with the auspicious land. And Fengxian just blurted out. And no wonder HuaLian would get mad about that, because that whole incident started the downhill. I mean, granted, Xie Lian and all them have been going downhill for a while, but that was like one of the major dominoes, right? That was a big ordeal. So I'm glad. Go lay down. No. That was like a major ordeal. So I liked the fact that they finally brought it up. We'll talk about it. And that whole scene there finally got brought back up. But I'm glad that that's what the conversation was about. That explains why HuaLian was so angry about it. Xie Lian's like, I don't get what the big deal is. And HuaLian was like, We'll talk about that. But I'm glad that's answered. Now all we got to do is find out about that damn puppet, and we'll be set to go. Thank goodness. So yeah, fetus spirit origin, 500 years. I feel like we have to go back around to the fetus spirit. It's going to get answered in this volume, right? Even if it's not a major thing, it's going to get answered in this volume, I'm pretty sure. And then the brocade immortal Ling Wen, who knows? Now, the cursed shackle business with, now we know that Mu Qing has a cursed shackle. So that's going to get brought up in this. And I want to put that on here with the cursed shackle and Mu Qing. This is weird. Hear me out. But I thought for a hot second that maybe Junwoo put Yin Yu's cursed shackle onto Mu Qing. I thought maybe that was a thing, because I can imagine Junwoo being like, I don't want to hold on to this cursed shackle forever. This seems like just what I want to do. But I can't just leave it lying around, because then Yin Yu's spirit or soul could be released from it, and then that would be a bad ordeal. So to me, it felt like maybe there's a possibility that Junwoo, because Junwoo talked to Mu Qing right after the whole Yin Yu thing happened, so maybe the situation was he gave Mu Qing the cursed shackle that was Yin Yu's, or just put a cursed shackle onto Mu Qing. I don't know, but I guess we'll find out what'll end up happening with that, if anything. Then the Thundermaster, who knows? Fengxian and Xie Lian found Fengxian, and I feel like we're getting closer to that whole thing with Xie Lian. Lan Chanchu, Ling Wen, Heshan, Qirong. MXTX got too much to do, too much to worry about. But okay, so we're gonna be making some comparisons as we go through this from Mount Tonglu back in Volume 6 to now in Volume 8. Funny how we'd go back to that, all that fun stuff. But man, Mu Qing. We're gonna talk about Mu Qing because I would like to play devil's advocate for Mu Qing, but I'm like, dude, you are exhausting, sir. So I will say that this part here where Mu Qing and Function fight each other, right? Back in Volume 6, Mu Qing and Function were trying to rescue Xie Lian from HuaQing. We had all the funny like horror movie, like they're running away from him and he was chasing after them. Here, Xie Lian is trying to find HuaQing and figure out and also stay with Function and Mu Qing. So I like that, like it's like keeping the gang all together rather than trying to run away from HuaQing, right? And instead in the past, it was like HuaQing was suspicious according to Function and Mu Qing, but it turned out that Function and Mu Qing were imposters from Bai Wusheng. Here, everyone is suspicious. Everyone is suspicious at first, but then it's like none of them are imposters. None of them are imposters, but Bai Wusheng arrives anyway. It's just like Bai Wusheng's like, surprise, bitch, I'm tired of waiting on y'all. I'm like, stop it. Just go away, Bai Wusheng. Nobody wants you anymore. We're done being tortured by you, please. No. So, yeah, it's like in the past, Bai Wusheng was just like toying with Xie Lian, impersonating Function and Mu Qing. And here, they all just kind of are suspicious of each other because of what they've experienced in the past. And then when they finally all come together, it's like Bai Wusheng's like, well, damn it, I'm just going to come out and do it myself. It's like Junwoo / Bai Wusheng has to become Thanos and be like, I'll handle it myself then. Because, yeah, we'll talk about Xie Lian's test with Mu Qing, which I believe is a test. And Xie Lian passes the test because Xie Lian is our cinnamon bun deity who is just a freaking saint. I love him. But yeah, so they just try to all, go against each other. My thing with Mu Qing is, we'll talk about Mu Qing over here, is the idea that Mu Qing is not a malicious person. And I want to make that very clear. He is not a malicious, I don't want to say he's mean-spirited, but he's not a malicious, sinister person. There is just a lot of insecurity there, right? He is very insecure with how others view him, And he is a bit of a coward because he wants to please people. He's a bit of a coward. He wants to be seen as quote unquote good. And he just falls in line with the system. Right? It's kind of interesting because you have Function who very much follows the system. But that's because Function's such a pragmatic, practical person. They believe in the system and they're like, oh, this is how the system works. I believe in it. If I follow the system, I'm doing the right thing. And that's kind of what he does. Mu Qing doesn't necessarily believe the system is the right thing. He's not like gung-ho about it like Function is, but he knows that if he follows in line with it, then that will make him popular or make him successful. And that's what he's after. He's like, my happiness will be equated on how successful I can be. Which is why it was so hard for him back when Xie Lian was struggling so much, because he's like, this is not benefiting me at all following you. And it's ultimately why he left and why he went along with the cultivators instead of Xie Lian. And so it's just like Mu Qing has his insecurities. He just kind of falls in line with whatever is going to be beneficial to him. And he has a lot of trust issues. And the thing that's kind of sad about Mu Qing is that he doesn't think anyone would help him or do something for him. Right? We were talking about what drag queens each character in series that I am watching would be, and I was talking about this with Jujutsu Kaisen. I think for Mu Qing, the drag queen they would be is Thor G. Thor. Not because of looks or anything like that, but Thorgy Thor is a drag queen on one of the seasons that would just get in their head all the time. They would get in their head. They were obsessed with how people thought of them. And it was one of those things, there was an analogy in one of the episodes where one of the drag queens was like, if you ever just want to get in Thorgy's head, you just walk by and go, that scarf? And then they'll just obsess about it to the point where they go crazy. That's kind of like Mu Qing. Mu Qing doesn't believe that anybody's going to be there for them. And they believe that everybody's going to think the worst about them and make the worst conclusion about them. So they constantly make these decisions that are harmful, but they don't have any faith that anybody's going to help them or be there for them. Right? And they're kind of one of those, I'm going to leave the situation before it gets bad, even when it won't get bad. Like he left Xie Lian and Feng Xin before he presumably thought that they would leave him. So it's really sad because it's like, you want to like Mu Qing? You want to be like, hey, buddy, I want to like you as a character, but he's so exhausting. And God, the whole thing with the dagger in the mountain, we're going to talk about that whole scene. But I was just like, come on, Mu Qing, like, what we doing, right? Oh, it was just very, very, very frustrating. And then as Xie Lian's trying to mull over, I think Xie Lian wasn't exactly sure if either of them was an imposter. And he was just kind of like, well, what do I do? I don't really believe that either of them are an imposter. I think they're just fighting each other because that's all they do because they're cats and dogs. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, I really just want to find San Long. And so what's crazy is they acknowledge back, Bai Wusheng imitating both of them. And Xie Lian's like, well, I like that Xie Lian tries to be, he tries to be sly about it, being like, well, HuaChang wouldn't tell me about what they said on the mountain. I'll get them to tell me by revealing. I was like, yes, Xie Lian, do it for us. We want to know these truths. Ask about the puppet next, please. I want to find out. So I like that he tries to ask that, and neither of them want to answer because they know that was like one of the most sensitive things to talk to Xie Lian about, and they don't want to bring it up. They're like, I don't want to make Xie Lian feel bad in this cave when we're trying to get out of here and find Junwoo and figure out what to do, right? So they finally, Rui like jumps out and catches a hold of HuaChang. Rui's like, I'm over this. What I love about it is that Xie Lian gets onto Rui. He's like, Rui, bad you, Rui. Why'd you go after him? And oh my God, the idea that Xie Lian bumped into the hilt of Eming, we can make all of the boner jokes that we want, but now's not the time. It's like, we don't have time for a boner joke. Nope, it's Christmas. We don't have time for that. So oh my God. And then of course, HuaChang is like, hey, I've been looking for you. This place is weird. What's so fascinating is the Palace of Wuyang is like this amalgamation of the caverns that Yin Yu and Xie Lian were trying to like burrow through under the heavenly capital, which makes sense because we're at the Palace of Wuyang. So the fact that the heavenly capital is designed after it makes a lot of sense. But it also is like the Palace of Wuyang. Everything's like their catacombs, and HuaChang's not familiar with this place like he was with other parts of Mount Tonglu, so it's kind of freaky. And Bai Wusheng and Junwoo are manipulating the space, so of course it's freaky. We don't know where the Goshi is. I guess we should add the Goshi to our list of where is he? I'm gonna put him up here where we took something off at, right? And that way we can keep on whittling away. We don't know what's happened with the Goshi. He's still missing. Poor Mei Nianqing. I'm like, I will talk about that here at the end of the chapter set. I was like, oh no, he's still missing. And then they question whether HuaChang is the right one, which is like, you two boobs. I am glad because I started to even start doubting myself. I'm like, is this HuaChang? Especially when they figured out that Bai Wusheng, that Junwoo had heard the password that was HuaChang's password with Xie Lian. Especially when they pointed that out. For a second, I was like, oh, is this HuaChang? But I think it is. Yeah, especially with how they talk to Feng Xin later on. If it was Junwoo, I don't think that they would have that conversation the same way. We're going to talk about that conversation. I really liked that conversation. That was like a game changer moment, right? Which I really, really like. But yeah. So he's like, this place is really, really weird. And he's like, we don't know where the Goshi is. He's like, what are those two fighting about? And he's like, it's all Rui's fault. I love it. And then he's like, so why are you doubting if I'm the real thing? I thought for a second HuaChang would ask Xie Lian to like make out with him and find out for himself. But again, one thing I do like about this series is HuaChang is of utmost respect to Xie Lian. He's not going to make Xie Lian do something that he's uncomfortable with, especially around, you know, Feng Shen and Mu Qing. He knows Xie Lian would get highly embarrassed, so he's not going to ask him about it. And so instead, he's just like, well, you know, here's a way you can test it, and only we'll know about it. Plus, that gives HuaChang a little bit of a chance to be like, it's something only we know. Get out of here, Feng Shen and Mu Qing. Right? And so Xie Lian's like, yep, that's the real one. And they're like, why are you two fighting? And he's like, I don't know who's more suspicious. And HuaChang's like, it's him because of the thing on his wrist. And there's a cursed shackle there. And I like that HuaChang just, you know, HuaChang does not like Mu Qing, has not liked Mu Qing. And the thing that's so fascinating is that, you know, you have Xie Lian, who doesn't hold grudges. He lets it go. We'll talk about that at the lava point. But HuaChang holds grudges. HuaChang holds grudges. They balance each other out. HuaChang holds grudges, and he's like, if you screw my Gege over, I will never forgive you. And he's just sitting here like, HuaChang's like, I have these questions. If you don't answer them, I will pummel you into oblivion. And he's like, why did Junwoo say? I just love that HuaChang is taking all of our questions as the audience and is like, here it is, here it is, here it is, answer it. And Mu Qing doesn't exactly answer all of them. He said, why did Junwoo summon you to the Great Martial Hall? So let's bring this up. He said, why did Junwoo summon you? So he did that. And then he asks, what did he say? What did he say? And he's like, why did you receive better treatment? Why did you receive treatment? Why was that? Could you return and could return? Why'd you receive better treatment and could return without harm? Yeah, because Mu Qing just shows up and everybody's like, where have you been? He's like, oh, I don't know. It's like, huh, why are you behaving weird? So why are you weird? What's up? And then he says, you volunteered to come rescue people. And what's the cursed shackle about and why'd you lure us here? So what's with the cursed shackle? And why lure us here? Which we get some of these answered. So that's a good thing, right? And so Mu Qing is like, yes, I did knock Feng Shen out, but it's not what you think, right? And we get to chapter 232, and I do believe Mu Qing when he says, look, Feng Shen was running around screaming for Xie Lian, acting a fool, wasn't leaving, and so yeah, I knocked him out so that I could get him out of there. And so and I like that, one, it shows Mu Qing does inherently care for Feng Shen a little bit, just doesn't want to admit it. But two, he doesn't care enough to take Feng Shen with him. He was just going to give him to Xie Lian, which is hilarious and in character. So I feel like I believe that. I believe Mu Qing would be like, Baka, here, Xie Lian, take him, go. But by that time, they'd already left. And that's when the fetus showed up and ambushed him. And we know the fetus spirit has attacked Mu Qing before. We don't know why, but we know he's attacked him before. And so that all makes sense. That all tracks. And then Feng Shen was taken away by Xie Lian and the fetus spirit to this place. Makes sense. So we get this kind of answered, like, you know, why are you being weird? And why'd you lure us here? Well, he did know Junwoo was like going to try to get them, but he also knew that Feng Shen was there. So that's why. And he lured, and he was acting weird because he wasn't sure if Feng Shen was alive or dead. He was just like, so yeah, I like it. I like that we get that answer. It definitely makes sense with Mu Qing's character, right? So he had come out of guilt. And he's like, the fetus is the white no-face's subordinate, which is really interesting because the fetus spirit also like nuzzles up to Junwoo. So it's a nice little reminder of Bai Wusheng and Junwoo's connection with one another. Very much so. He's like, I just made the decision that was best for all parties at the moment. And Feng Shen's like, well, best decision my ass. That's just because it's not your family. He's like, you were trying to save me and make me leave. And he's like, and that's when HuaChang's like, I don't care about the Mori baby daddy business. I could care less. HuaChang's like, I'm not here for that. He's like, what did Junwoo say? And Mu Qing wouldn't say. And he's like, are you under his command? And he's like, no. Then he's like, why do you have a cursed shackle? And he's like, you guys won't believe me. And then they're like, well, then just finish. He says, he wanted me to do detrimental things to his highness. So I refused. And then he couldn't continue. So, the curse shackle is because Junwoo wanted him to harm. Quote, I'm going to put harm in quotation marks because he didn't know exactly what he asked for. To harm Xie Lian, but he said no. And that's why he was summoned. The other questions aren't really answered. Mu Qing does not tell him what Junwoo said to him, which is curiouser and curiouser. The thing that's going to be very interesting is Mu Qing. I didn't realize this when I read during the reaction, but I went back and reread the chapters in the English translation before I started this discussion. And Mu Qing fell into the lava with Xie Lian, Bai Wusheng, and now HuaChang is coming to get them. So I like the function just stuck around. HuaChang's like, stay here. I kind of maybe like you. We'll talk about that. HuaChang's like, I can tolerate you. Stay here. If Mu Qing dies, don't care. So, but yeah, basically Bai Wusheng arrives and drags Xie Lian to the lava. Mu Qing is with them. And HuaChang looks like he's coming to save them. Or to save Xie Lian. He don't give a shit about Mu Qing. He would leave Mu Qing in a heartbeat, I feel. But he's going to save Xie Lian because that's his gege. And he's like, son of a bitch. But, and maybe he left Fengshen behind to be like, look, if the Goshi shows back up, tell him we went down here. But it's like, it's a lava flow. So, how... I don't know. I feel like Bai Wusheng would not just fling Xie Lian into a lava pit. That seems a bit extreme in terms of, he doesn't want to just kill Xie Lian outright. He wants to torture him. So flinging him into the lava would not be enough. Now the lava, the creepy imagery of the lava parting so that Bai Wusheng can come right through it is terrifying. So I wonder if Bai Wusheng has this ability, since he's a ghost and doesn't seem affected by the lava. And plus it's lava that's under his command and Junwoo's because they're both the Prince of Wuyong. I wonder if Bai Wusheng has an ability to like part the lava and like make it separate, and maybe they'll make like a space down at the bottom of this pit that they're all going to gather at, and the lava will be just surrounding them, like it could cave in on them at any moment, and they'll have like a little chat or something. I'm supposed to wait until I see if the manhwa comes out, but I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna happen. I don't want to wait. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to wait, y'all. I definitely want to wait until I get some comments for this coming from this last week. But once I get those comments, I don't know if I'm gonna wait for the manhwa. I just don't know. I don't know if I can. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but HuaChang asks him to explain the cursed shackle, and he explains as much as he can. And so HuaChang's like, so in a fit of anger, he put a cursed shackle on you. And Mu Qing doesn't answer the question. And then HuaChang says, from the bottom of your heart, do you believe the words you just said? And it's almost like that in itself to Mu Qing is such a blow, because it's suggesting that HuaChang doesn't believe him. So he's asking him to question himself, being like, are you lying or not? And Mu Qing's like, believe if you will. There's a misunderstanding in me knocking Fengshen out, but I'm not under anyone's command. And I like that line. It's as if Mu Qing suffered a great humiliation. He's like, nobody believes me. And Fengshen's like, just tell the truth. And Mu Qing's like, what I'm saying is the truth. What did you want to hear? Again, Mu Qing always goes to like the worst assumption and assumes that everybody's going to think the worst of him. So he's like, well, is this what you want to hear? Am I a villain? I'm not a villain, but okay. And it's just like, it's like Mu Qing is so much in his own head that he can't accept that if he just was honest from the start, people probably wouldn't. He thinks everybody's going to have this negative opinion of him no matter what. And it's like, if you were just honest, then no, people would not have this negative opinion of you, but they have right to question you because you don't come straight out and say things. Like, Fengshen is too straightforward and pragmatic, and Mu Qing is the opposite of it. And it's like, oh my gosh, But HuaChang is like, look, you have a track record. And that's when it's brought up about the auspicious land, the blessed land that they stole. Now, I'm really curious, because back in Volume 6, it was revealed that HuaChang was the soldier and the little boy, right? And that's when Function and Xie Lian and all them kind of discovered that. Here, we have the notion that HuaQing was the ghost fire on the mountain. Like, it's all been coming out, and they spent a little chunk of this chapter set making it to where Xie Lian and Function and we're connecting the dots. I just want HuaQing to come out and say it. I just want HuaQing to tell Xie Lian, be like, it's been me all along. I've been following you. I've been defending you. I've been devoting my heart to you because I love you and I worship you, and I'm just like, it's been me from the start. And I feel like Xie Lian is gathering all that information and piecing it all together, but he's just not entirely sure. And he's like, well, what do I do with this information if I do piece it together? Because Xie Lian's like, HuaQing hasn't told me outright, so there's, you know, probably a reason he doesn't want to tell me. So what do I say? But it's all starting to come to the wash. And I feel like we've debated in the discussions that the reason HuaQing doesn't tell Xie Lian all this is he doesn't want Xie Lian to feel bad and to feel guilty that HuaQing has suffered and become a ghost fire and did all this because of Xie Lian and following him. Like back when he died on the battlefield, he didn't want to tell Xie Lian because Xie Lian would feel guilty that someone following him had died and all this stuff had happened to him. I think that if we get to the bottom of this lava pool, whatever's going to happen and how we get there, I think that Bai Wuxiang or Junwu or both are going to tell Xie Lian that HuaQing is the one that's been all of these people. They're going to out him and reveal it to Xie Lian, thinking that Xie Lian would feel guilty, thinking it would crush Xie Lian to know that someone that's suffering or suffered was because of him. And I think Xie Lian's going to be the one to say, oh, that's okay. I love him and I know he's devoted to me, and he's going to like flip the script on Bai Wuxiang and like be like, no, it's fine. I don't feel guilty at all. I'm endeared and love him for it. And it's just going to be like, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe, I don't know what's going to happen if, do we think like with the Goshi, I can put the Goshi up here. Do we think that the Goshi is going to find Junwu while this whole thing with Bai Wuxiang is going on? I feel like we're not going to see anything with the Goshi and Junwu unless Xie Lian sees it. So like, is the Goshi and Junwu going to show up after the resolution of whatever this business is with HuaQing and Bai Wuxiang and Xie Lian and Mu Qing? I don't know. I honestly thought there was a big chance Mu Qing was going to die in this chapter set. I thought he was going to die like 2 or 3 times, and I was like, are we about to lose Mu Qing? Is he about to die? Is this going to be a thing? But he doesn't. But it is definitely a test, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, so Mu Qing, he feels like he's being cornered. And of course, Mu Qing feeling cornered feels like nobody's going to trust him. They're all going to attack him. So his fight or flight response is to fly away. That is his immediate reaction, is just to leave the situation. So when he leaves, it is frustrating as all get out to leave the 3 of them in this armory. We'll talk about the armory here in a second. But it is so frustrating when he leaves them because it makes Mu Qing look suspicious, even though we, the audience, know he's just leaving because he's scared and he thinks that they're not going to trust him and they're going to come at him. And it's like, but you leaving makes yourself look even more suspicious. So why are you doing that? It's like, stop it, Mu Qing. Quit. But then they get to this armory. And I thought it was really fascinating that when we had the armory, you know, you had Xie Lian at Junwu's armory back at the beginning of the story. And he was like, oh my gosh, this armory, all the swords, ah. And then we see Xie Lian have his own armory and be like, oh my gosh, all the swords, ah. And then we see him go to Paradise Manor and see the armory. He's like, oh my gosh, all the swords, ah. Here at Wuyong, in that original armory, Xie Lian's like, I don't like any of this. It doesn't have, it's such a moment of Xie Lian, like he's no longer interested in Junwu. It's like relationship with Junwu over because he's not into the swords here. These swords all have this murderous aura. None of them are like the sacred heroic relics. They're all like deadly weapons. He doesn't like any of them. It's like, it feels like such a turning point to see Xie Lian actively turn Junwu away, being like, I don't like any of this. Not for me. Thanks. And this is the part that at first they tried to make it in the story. They tried to make it seem like HuaQing was going to be like the imposter or something. And Feng Xin tried to say it too, being like, oh, well, he's the imposter because of such and such. And Xie Lian had to like question himself for a moment. And you're like, wait, what? But the thing of it is, the thing that's so crazy about it is, no, it's not that Huachong is an imposter. It's not that he's trying to keep Xie Lian from using Feng Shen. He was worried about Xie Lian hurting himself again. And it's been building up, right? It's been building up over and over again. And when Huachong said, you know, he's like, the swords are going to come after the three of us, and we're going to have to get harmed in order to, you know, provide the necessary murder to get out of here. What I thought he was meaning was that he was going to have Mu Qing and himself and Feng Shen sacrifice themselves so that Xie Lian wouldn't get hurt, and then the four of them could leave together. That's what I thought was going to happen. He's like, okay, Feng Shen, Mu Qing, myself, we're going to get ourselves harmed by these swords to appease them. Xie Lian, you stand there and do nothing. Do not hurt yourself, and then we'll all get out of here. That's what I thought it was going to do, but then we find out Mu Qing just left. And left the three of them. But yeah, Huachong is like, I am tired of seeing you self-harm. I'm tired of it. And I like that Huachong is finally putting his foot down, and he's like, look, I've been nice, and I've been trying to be vocal, and I've been, you know, politely saying like, Gege, I don't think you should do this. And now he's like, no, you need to stop hurting yourself. It's like he's saying it out of love. And it's not like he's forcing Xie Lian to not do something, but he's just being very vocal about him being opposed to it, right? And him saying, why did you pull out the sword? I like that he demands, like, why'd you pull it out? And Xie Lian's like, to defend myself. And he's like, well, how do you plan on defending yourself? And when he says put the sword down, it's the first time he had spoken to Xie Lian with this kind of tone. And Xie Lian was like, oh, we've never had this happen. But Huachong, he's like, if we're going to be in a relationship, I need you to stop sacrificing yourself. And he wasn't sure if Xie Lian was being sincere or not. I thought whenever Xie Lian put the sword away, because he trusted him, he put Feng Shen away. He didn't believe Feng Shen, thinking it was Junwu. He put the sword away, and it's like, I think this is still who he says he is. It's just like he acted this way. I think like he acted before. It was something I did that made him think this, you know, be this way. And that's when Ming comes, and Ming just destroys all the swords. And for a second, I thought that maybe it was Ming's attack, that he made Xie Lian put Feng Shen away because he knew Ming was going to attack anything that was a weapon or was threatening at the moment. So as long as Xie Lian put Feng Shen away, the other swords would be destroyed. But that wasn't the case. The case was he thought Xie Lian was going to stab himself or hurt himself to appease the other swords and solve the problem for all of them. And Huachong was like, no, you don't have to do that. I have Ming. I can solve the problem. It's fine. He's like, you don't have to hurt yourself anymore. And I really like when they're leaving the cave and he's like, well, what are we going to do next? And Xie Lian's like, well, we have to go find Goshi and Mu Qing. And Huachong states very calmly, if Mu Qing has surrendered himself to Junwu, then I'm going to take his shit life first. Like, just says it nonchalant. Like, I'm just telling you right now, I'm going to kill him if he betrayed us. Xie Lian's like, you're not being serious, Huachong. He's like, yes. And that's when, one thing I really like in this series is that whenever Xie Lian feels like there's a communication issue with Huachong, he doesn't wait around and stew on it. Like you see so many characters and stories just be like, I wonder if he's mad at me. I don't know. And it's like a 50-page ordeal. No, Xie Lian's like, let's talk about it right now. Let's clear the air and figure out what's going on. We don't have time to be awkward around each other. Let's just figure out what the deal is. And he's like, did you think I was going to stab myself earlier? And Huachong is just like, and he's like, I wouldn't have. And I like that Huachong looks at him and he's like, really? Are you sure? And that's when Xie Lian tries to make the joke of saying, well, there were so many sabers and spears and swords. If they stabbed me, I would have been stabbed to mush. Ha ha ha! And then immediately Huachong stares at him like, because Huachong knows what happened back in book 4 when Xie Lian was stabbed to mush by Bai Wusheng and all the people. And Huachong is like, mm-mm. And I love that Huachong, instead of just being mad, instead of yelling at Xie Lian, he goes over and hugs him. And I like Feng Shen's like, in front of my salad? What? And Huachong whispering, he's like, don't laugh like that anymore. It's not funny at all. And it's like we just watched the Donghua in episode 7 last week where Xie Lian was like, you know, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And he just sits there and he's like, laughing like, good, you don't want to be me? Great. Ha ha ha. And Huachong's just staring at him. And this is exactly like that, where he's like, look, you've hurt yourself so much and you brush it off like it's nothing, but you still were hurt horribly. And he's like, I'm tired of you making these jokes about self-harm. He's like, I don't find it funny. And I like that HuaChang, you know, he's demanding, but he's not like saying it's not like an ultimatum. He's just like, it's not funny. He's like, I love you. And like his tone is saying, I love you and I don't want you to think this way about yourself. It's not healthy. It's so sweet, right? And Xie Lian's like, oh, I won't joke about this again with you. He's like, I didn't want you to worry, but I didn't think it'd have the opposite effect. And then Function's like, I'm still here. It's great. So then we have the lava flow. And the question is, did Mu Qing start the lava flow? Was he just around when it started? And he's like, my dumb luck. Like, it is a little bit suspicious when Mu Qing just turns around and is running past them and doesn't, you know, stop to tell them. It's like, Mu Qing, come on now. Come on. But I do think it's also hilarious that the empty-shelled mutants, they're just like using them as canoes. Function, like using his with the bow, I like the Function and HuaChang can like, they can intimidate their empty-shelled corpse to like do what they want, but then Xie Lian's like, do what I say, please, I'll burn incense for you. And the corpse is like, really? Poor Xie Lian's luck. He's such a cinnamon bowl. He's such a cinnamon roll in these chapters. He's the biggest cinnabon. It's so cute. And then Mu Qing using it as a surfboard. It's like surfing Pikachu. What we doing? But I like the callback to the beginning of this arc where they come here. And then we see there's a cliff. I got like instant Emperor's New Grooves vibes where there's like the cliff and where you have Cusco and Pacha tied to the log, and they're like, is that a pretty big cliff? Yeah, with lava flowing down to the bottom, it's gonna probably burn us to death. Bring it on. Booyah! I need Xie Lian to say booyah as him and Bai Wusheng and Mu Qing are flying downwards past the lava waterfall, and HuaChang's like, no, Gege! Like again. So yeah, Ruri and them manage to save each other, but they can't make it to Mu Qing. And again, like we've said in the last volume, I want to see this animated because I want to visually see it play out. I want to see how Star Ember draws it. It's just the idea of this waterfall of lava, and Mu Qing is on the edge and has the saber stuck in the rock. And just the idea that Mu Qing is holding onto the hilt, and it's a conductor of heat, right? Because that metal would conduct the heat. So the idea it's burning his hands and probably like melting the flesh on his hands, but he doesn't let go because he doesn't want to fall to his death. And the idea that they're all trying to figure out, well, how do we save him? And the thing about it is that Mu Qing calls out and he's like, please, Your Highness, you know I wasn't lying. And he's like, you know I wasn't lying. I couldn't have harmed any of you, right? That callback to you know I wasn't lying. And Mu Qing realizes it, and Xie Lian realizes it. And the thing that's so amazing about this scene is I thought for a second like it was a way that I kept thinking the entire time during this chapter said that this was all an elaborate test, again, set by Junwoo. Because again, what would be the biggest test is if Junwoo was like, well, fine, you won't hurt Xie Lian. I bet he hurts you because he doesn't trust you and doesn't like you. So here's the thing, you're going to lead them to go do this, and we'll see if something happens. Would Xie Lian risk his life to save you? Probably not, because you're not worth it. I bet he's told Mu Qing that and just made him even more insecure. And so when we get to this point and Mu Qing is like just dangling there, he's thinking to himself, he's like, oh my God, why would Xie Lian save me? I just said the words that he said to me when he's begging me on the mountain. And how did I respond to those words? Kicked him down the mountain. He's like, Xie Lian is not going to save me. He's not going to treat me with the same courtesy that I didn't treat him back then. And the funny thing is that Xie Lian was going to save him. It wasn't the fact that Xie Lian was debating it too hard. I mean, HuaChang was like, no, he's not worth saving. Screw him. He's like, look, this is, and I like that HuaChang is like, look, the lava streams are going to stop. Unless the lava stream stops flowing, making a rescue attempt is life-threateningly dangerous. And I like that HuaChang kind of gives him the solution in that moment. He's like, well, unless the lava stream stops flowing, and Xie Lian thinks up, oh, I'll just put Feng Xin in the lava stream to stop it from flowing so I can jump on it to get to him. But then he says if Mu Qing has surrendered to Junwoo, then Junwoo would definitely have a way to get him out of there, but you would fall into danger. And he's like, he's been acting suspicious. Are you sure you want to do this? But as he tells Feng Shen, he's like, I knew he was going to. I just had to say my piece. Hua Chong's like, I had to say what I was thinking, get it out there in the open, but I knew Xie Lian was going to save him because I know my Gege, and that's just how he is. And that's that. Hua Chong has that never failing, never faltering faith in Xie Lian, that Xie Lian is going to do the right thing. He has had that utmost faith in him from the start. And Mu Qing got in his own head, and because there was no time for communication, because Xie Lian was too busy thinking about what to do, he assumed that that hesitation and that silence meant that Xie Lian wasn't going to help, and he lost faith, right? But that's why Hua Chong is like, that's why you're not his Gege, because you don't believe in him. And so then Xie Lian is like, no, I was just trying to think of a way to save you, and that's why I didn't immediately respond. It's so sweet. And it's like, yes. So if Bai Wusheng or Junwoo was trying to use Mu Qing dangling off the edge of a cliff as a test, well, they failed and Xie Lian passed it. Because Xie Lian's like, no, I'm not holding grudges. No, I realize what you said and you realize what you said, but that was 800 years ago. And now is now. So I'm not going to let you fall. If he hadn't already ascended, I'd be like, oh, ascend again, Xie Lian, ascend again. Like him just being the best cinnamon bun. And I love that because I figured that we first met Xie Lian in the story, he was a cinnamon roll. And then we started learning about his like detailed dark past. And then after we learn about this dark past, it's like, okay, well, is Xie Lian going to be this jaded character the rest of the story? And he's not. We go back to being like, this is why he's a cinnamon bun, because he went through all this struggle and all this strife, but he had someone believe in him, and that's all he needed. Oh, our cinnamon bun, I love him so much. And then he's like, are you both all right? And he's like, yeah, of course. He's like, come on. And when he holds his hand down to Mu Qing, and he's like, come on. And he's like, so long as it's success. When he grabs him, I like that. Hua Chong is like, okay, now get back here right now. He's like, I let you do this. Now come on, let's go. And he's like, I'm coming right back. And he's like, well, can you jump, Mu Qing? But if not, I'll take you. And my favorite part of this whole exchange is Mu Qing hesitates. And he's like, well, I don't know. And Xie Lian's like, I'll take you. Doesn't wait for him to like hesitate. He's like, no, I'm going to save you. It's okay. A little heart. It's like, I'm like, Mu Qing, your little grid chart better expand 3 sizes because Xie Lian's like freaking Santa Claus. Like, he's just this little saint. I don't know. But just as he's like about to go, they like are about to fall the first time, and Hua Chong is like, Gege, like, this is bad. And Xie Lian's like, no, we're good. And Hua Chong's like, if you don't get up here right now, we're gonna have problems. But of course, Xie Lian throws Mu Qing up first because that's just how he is, right? And Hua Chong's just like, he's like, if you don't get back here soon, I'm going to come down and get you. Which, he's now going down to get him. So next chapter said it's going to be like, ah. And Xie Lian's like, I'm coming. Things are all right. Not too hard to handle. I can handle myself. Don't come down. And I love this exchange between Hua Chong and Feng Shen, where Feng Shen's like, I'm a little bit surprised. And I like that Hua Chong's having none of it. Hua Chong is just like, what? It's like, what are you talking about? Just leave me alone. And I like the Feng Shen is like, I didn't think you would save Mu Qing because you would tell. He's like, I thought you would tell Xie Lian he's not worth saving and try to convince him to not go down. And Hua Chong's like, well, I don't think any of you were saving. So there's that. And Feng Shen's like, okay. But Hua Chong's like, I'm not gonna make decisions for Xie Lian. He can do whatever he chooses, and I will never oppose his decisions. That's the big difference between him and Bai Wusheng and Junwoo. Junwoo and Bai Wusheng have been trying to like influence Xie Lian and in some regards tell him what to do. And Hua Chong's like, whatever he decides to do, I'm gonna be going with it. And I like the Feng Shen's like, that devotion is kind of like incredible, like you're ruining the standards for all men. I'm glad I'm glad Jean-Lan doesn't like you. or should I be concerned? You know? And he's like, oh, I see, yeah. And he's like, and I love the moment where Hua Chong is like, he just smiles and goes, I already knew he was gonna do this. I knew he was gonna save him, so I just gotta help him in any way I can. I kind of like this moment because it's like the most cordial that HuaChang has been to Feng Shen this entire series, which is not saying much, but I feel like HuaChang's like, he can stay, I guess. I guess he's fine, just stay away from me. I feel like it's when you and a partner go to see your partner's friends and you don't really care for them, but you're just like really sucking it up and just trying to get through it. Like, you're like, I gotta get through this holiday dinner. I don't like any of these people, but I like them, so I guess I'll tolerate them. Right? What the fudge? It's great. And that's when, of course, Bai Wusheng shows up, and HuaChang is like, just jumps immediately after him, saying, Your Highness. And of course, Bai Wusheng is like Xie Lian, Shanla, do you think that this is going to be like a happy ending or something? Like, did you not realize we're just at the start of this book? What? Bai Wusheng's like, oh, we're just in the first part, so you didn't think this was all just going to be over, huh? Which I'm like, no, I didn't think it was about to be over because we still have all this stuff to answer. So, but Bai Wusheng leading them deeper into the recesses of Mount Tonglu. What the fudge? What the fudge? What do we do about this? I don't even know. I don't even know. So, what do we think is going to happen? Well, Feng Shen, I think, is being put on watch to make sure if the Goshi shows up. I don't know if the Goshi would show up with, unless if they go like, I don't know if the bottom of the lava flow, like if Bai Wusheng like manages to open it up and there's like another passageway that leads deeper into the Palace of Wuyang, like could the Goshi be with Junwu already and Bai Wusheng? If Bai Wusheng and Junwu like show up together on the same plane again, that's gonna be freaky as hell. And what if they show up and the Goshi is like tied up, Mei Nianqing is tied up, and then my fear is that when they rolled the snake eyes, it pointed that something bad might happen to HuaChang. And I feel like at this point, Bai Wusheng and or Junwu might fight HuaChang. And I'm not sure I'm ready to see that or not. I don't know. But I don't know how long I'm going to wait either. I really would like to see Manhwa Chapter 102. I hope it happens, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to hold back and wait until we get to that next chapter set. So I'm going to wait for some comments, and I'm going to hold back. I'm going to record some other things for other shows. But y'all, the first 4 chapters in, and we're left on a dang cliffhanger. MXTX, how dare you? So, if you're watching this on Patreon, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, I hope it's wonderful. And if you're watching this on YouTube the week after, happy 2024, an MXTX cliffhanger. Why did we expect anything different? But I'm excited to start 2024 with Heaven Official's blessing and MXTX, and I hope you all are as well. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more Heaven Official's blessing.